Has everybody got a copy of the agenda who wants one? Because I actually have a spare one here, and I think there's some others. There are some others which people can help themselves to.
Can I ask why the town clerk isn't here this evening? Oh, sorry, the chief executive.
I think
Is she ill again?
we have to fill in as and when, Richard, and I think, and we're very grateful to Mr. Diggle for filling in.
I'm sure we are. But we're paying for something we're not getting.
Yes, I'm not going to be distracted by members of the public. I am going to get on with this meeting. So, my opening remarks are partially addressed to the public so that they are also clear that we do have a temporary part-time clerk who is clerking this meeting, and we're fortunate to have recruited Artie Nicol, who's currently the clerk for Sutton by Dover Parish Council and has lots of experience. Welcome. The other thing I wanted to say, Artie, this is another councillor who's on this committee. This is Councillor Keith Heaven.
Oh.
The other thing I've been asked to say in my opening remarks is that Councillor Nicholas Gray is intending to resign from this committee in order to make way for the newly co-opted Councillor Vicky Tomlins, and that is something that will have to come to the next council meeting at the end of this month. Apologies for absence. I've received from Councillor Friend, who has a meeting at Dover District Council, Councillor Graham, who has given personal reasons for not attending, Councillor Sidrick, who has a family commitment, and there's one other, and I can't remember who it is.
He's not. Councillor Graham is not.
Councillor Graham.
Oh no, sorry, I take it all back. I take back so in fact, that's it. It's Councillor Sidrick,
Councillor Franklin.
Councillor Franklin is on this.
and Councillor Franklin, and I
Is
haven't
on
got
this committee.
anything from you. Okay. Item 3, declarations of interest. To receive any declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests from members in respect of business to be transacted on the agenda.
So it depends on what we're discussing under item 9, empty buildings in Sandwich. But I'm a governor for Sandwich Infant School next to the schoolhouse.
Right.
So depending on what we're discussing, I'll leave the room as appropriate.
Yes, thank you.
And
Yes.
it might also depend what we discussed about public conveniences on the quay in relation to the Heritage Harbour, which I want to mention
Yes.
when you come to that item.
Yes.
I am a trustee of the charity.
Yes. I mean, in a way, it would be useful to have both of you here, so you could give the point of view of your particular organisations, if you know it, if it's been discussed. But anyway, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Thank you. Item 4, public participation. A 15-minute session is set aside for members of the public to make representations at the meeting in respect of the business on the agenda. Are there any members of the public here who wish to make a public statement? Thank you, so there's nobody. So item 5, if you could turn to the report on tree and hedge planting in Sandwich. And I've drafted a report, and you'll see that it has an attachment written by the volunteer tree warden, Nicky Warden. This is the report that I've written relates to a walkabout which council members of this committee went on to look at some a number of proposals which both the voluntary tree warden and Dr. Stephen Fuller had made about the possibility of tree planting at particular sites in Sandwich. And the walkabout focused particularly on Cowley's Meadow, which was particularly the focus of Nicky Warden's interest. Stephen Fuller's interest, where he's talking about a moat park, is much more related to what some people call the ditch, but we all know it's actually a moat, and the trees that are planted there already and additions that could be made to that. We didn't really look in any great detail at the moat, but what we did look at particularly was the possibility of planting a hedge along the fence that is at the back of Malcolm Waits, and the hedge would be planted on the Cowley's Meadow side. And if you look at the attachment from the volunteer tree warden, she has described exactly how long this hedge would be. It would be about 50 metres. That a few whips would be left to grow as standard trees. She's mentioned the species that she's proposing to include in this hedge, and they are all indigenous species. There would be, as I've said in my report, very low costs to the planting of this hedge because the tree warden can access free whips, and she can also access free mulch, free standard trees, and she is insured. So all that would be covered. Councillor Sampson.
Yeah, so I've got to say, I think we should go ahead with this. The thing I would suggest we do when we go to full council is we include a map, just to show exactly how much of Cowley's Meadow. Because the only concern, I'm trying to imagine it in my head, and I imagine it'd be fine, but how much parking spaces we would take up for when it's used for events, etc. I imagine it wouldn't take up too much to be concerned, but a map would help.
It's a weird shape, so sorry, Councillor Sampson, it's a weird shape, so as you go in the gate it opens up quite wide, but then it narrows in, it bottlenecks as you go down to the far end of the
Just
field.
for the sake of the map,
But
Chair.
the fence is literally at the back of Malcolm Waits' garage.
Yeah.
It's a dead straight fence, and the idea is to make it look better and to add to the amenity of Cowley's Meadow by having a hedge along it. And it's about 50 metres long, and we looked at how it would impact on the view of the people who live in that large collection, those larger boarding houses that are next door to the garage, and worked out where the standard trees could be allowed to grow, and they wouldn't be grown to obstruct their view across the meadow. Yes.
Oh yeah, the only other question I've got, besides complementing the, what was it, community planting, again, the school would probably over the moon in that regard. However, what it says, the budget of £1,000, we say STC, can we check whether it may be better coming from Tollbridge Fund, just in terms of budget-wise? Which would work best?
Well, there would have to be a budget for which, because the voluntary tree warden hasn't got a bank account, in their separate.
I think there should be a budget.
There has to be a budget. I think we need to talk to the responsible finance officer to decide what. Yes, Councillor Wallace.
I think from memory, Cowley's is owned by the town council.
Yes.
Cowley
that's
is a
right.
council, not a Townscape.
Yes. Thank
But
you.
it's
That's
worth
very helpful.
also pointing out that Councillor Franklin is very keen that there shouldn't be any further encroachment onto the meadow itself
Yes.
with planting, apart from the hedging, because it's an ancient meadow
Yes.
for cows.
Though I think he became a bit more reconciled towards perhaps a bit of additional planting at the far end, but we're not talking about that at the moment.
Regarding the budget, sorry Councillor Anderson, regarding the budget, maybe it needs to be looked in regarding, because we have a meeting on Monday the 16th, don't we,
Yes.
regarding the budget, so we need
Yes.
to check to see whether that's included in.
That's right. That's why I'm keen to get this decision tonight, so that we could include it in the budget to be discussed on Monday.
Well, in that case, let's put a proposal forward. We support the proposal, recommend it to full council, speak to the responsible finance officer about adding it to the budget, STC, STDF, whatever works, and we provide a map in time for next meeting
Yes.
as well.
In fact, there was a map on the original proposal, but I cut it out.
And I was second that.
Okay, so all those in favour? So that's NEMCOM. Unanimous. Thank you. The next item, item 6, is tourist information. To receive and note the minutes of the tourist information working group from Councillor Wiles, and to receive a verbal update from Councillor Wiles regarding tourist information provision in Sandwich. So, Councillor Wiles, if you would like to introduce the topic.
Yeah, the minutes are self-explanatory. We've had 2 meetings now. The second one took place this Monday at the Bell Hotel. No alcohol was consumed or supplied at that meeting. It was a very successful meeting actually. We had about 23 people there, so a lot of public interest, which I think shows there is an appetite for the tourism issue generally within the town, especially from businesses. So the key comments this week related to the letter that's gone out. So we sent out a letter to a number of businesses, organisations, individuals in the town. I've hand-delivered about 90 of those and sent others out through email, and I'm starting to get responses back. And the main questions in that letter are about the current location of the Visitor Information Centre, and whether it should stay where it is or should move to another location, whether its opening hours should be extended or stay as they are, and so on, but also asking for any wider comments about tourist information within the town generally, because it's not just the town council and DDC and White Cliffs that provide tourist information, but many other organisations produce leaflets and information for tourists generally, and I think it's a case of trying to make sure there's a kind of joined up approach to all of that information. I mean, interestingly, this morning I spent about an hour and a half going around the Sandwich Leisure Park with Alan Smith, who's the owner. And they have in the season, peak season, they have maybe 1,000 people staying there overnight. So I think that's probably a lot of people in Sandwich don't know much about what goes on there. It's a huge site, 60 acres. So there's a huge potential impact on the Sandwich economy from those people shopping and eating and drinking in the town. And I think we need to make more of the information flows between the two.
Yes.
So that's where we are with tourist information. There's another meeting going to be set up within the next couple of weeks, and we will then report to the council probably in March sometime, and recommend some kind of decision for implementation before the next tourist season kicks off.
Yes. Thank you. Councillor Sutton.
I'll propose we receive a note. The only thing I'd add, even if it's just a very minor addition, we consider Discovery Park. So a lot of, I need to declare an interest here, I work for a company up there. We have these large open areas where people collect leaflets all the time. A lot of them don't live in Sandwich. Easily we could attract a bit of tourism that way. Just as a small idea.
That is a very good idea. I mean, there are all sorts of entry points for people coming into Sandwich, and obviously Discovery Park is an important one, and similarly this aqua park and the golf courses, and it's how to get them engaged in delivering tourist information so that people come into the town and enjoy it.
I mean, on Monday we did discuss widening the consultation to get views from the aqua park, from Wingham Wildlife Park, from the golf clubs. I think there was a feeling that there's a big untapped golf pound, if you like, that maybe we could get more of within the town.
Yes.
And we also talked on Monday about the phone boxes which the council owns. Maybe they could be mini tourist information.
For just quick information about that, I think one of them we are slightly limited on, and I'll have to check this, but at the time when they were taken over by the council, one of them I think has to be used for a certain purpose. But other than that, it sounds like a lovely idea.
We can find out about that.
And also we talked about a potential blue pack scheme which has been talked about there are some notable visitors and residents in Sandwich that are, you know, tied in with the town trails scheme could work well. Chris Townend came to the meeting from VDC, who's the head of tourism and investment. It was very useful. He sent us a lot of promotional material, which I'll circulate to the working group members. But he told us that the town trail signage and the heritage notice boards are about to be revamped. That was my recollection of what he said. So that's a good positive thing to be happening.
Yeah.
Because there is a feeling that the town is very fragmented, the quay and the town centre and the signage from the station to the town centre and, you know, from the quay to the town centre is not as good as it could be.
I would certainly concur with Colin Wilde, Councillor Wilde, in running a blue plaque scheme here. And Ramsgate run a very successful blue plaque scheme, and I think we really ought to think about doing that here.
I think it should be a blue plaque plus scheme.
Yes,
It should be a blue plaque that not only refers to famous people, but also describes something of the history of the building. And I observed that in Norwich over Christmas. That's the kind of blue plaque scheme they have.
Yeah.
It is not cheap.
No.
You have to have, I mean, I was instrumental in getting that, in quotes, blue plaque on the Bell Hotel, referring to the kitchen account, and it's already looking really frayed at the edges, and it's only made of metal. And you know, to get a good quality blue plaque with a lot of writing on it costs a lot of money. I mean, I know how much that blue plaque on the Bell Hotel costs, and I was amazed actually how much it costs. So, you know, those are things that are important.
My one ambition on this council is to get a blue plaque to Peter Derone, who lived in a house in Short Street.
Yeah.
And he's internationally known as the grandfather of gay erotic cinema. So whether Sandwich would wear that, I don't know.
Well, of course, we have Jane Garden, who's famous for writing a book called Old Filth.
Yeah.
Sandwich at night.
She's still getting strong. So. Okay. So we have a yes.
Just one more thing, sorry. Apologies, I couldn't make Monday. I was working, it's a work commitment, so I apologise I couldn't make it. Just reading the minutes of the Monday's meeting, because I've had them here.
No, these.
Yeah, I'm going to say it anyway. But it says, because it's mentioned in the previous minutes as well, regarding the Chamber of Commerce. There is a Chamber of Commerce, it's fully functioning. I'm a committee member of it. And if the tourism working group want to speak to the Chamber of Commerce, they can contact Councillor Friend or Councillor Paul Grant.
Okay. We'll certainly invite them along to the next meeting.
Absolutely. Okay, so we have a proposal from Councillor Sampson that we note the minutes and the report. Have we got a seconder? Councillor Marie is the seconder. Do we all vote in favour? So no comment again. Thank you. Okay, so item 7 is the Sandwich Waterways, and we've got a working group which actually is reporting to the main council, but obviously it's highly relevant to what goes on at this committee. So I asked Councillor Headland to give us a verbal update on what's happening.
The first official meeting of the Waterways Working Group will be next Thursday. I say official because there have been ideas exchanged between all members by email unofficially in the pre-Christmas period. The working group was really formed as a response to local residents' concerns about things like mosquitoes, dead fish floating in the water, the obvious stagnation of the water, very slow moving system, lots of algae and weed, a smell because it's so slow moving, and the general lack of flow and lack of oxygen. And it's surprisingly poor in terms of wildlife. Some water voles hang on, but there's very little to show for such an extensive stretch of water. So those are the main issues that the Waterways Group will address, and will prepare a report within 2 or 3 months. We have to acknowledge that most of the responsibility for the flow of water around Sandwich lies with the Environment Agency and not with the Town Council. To some extent with Dover District Council, which is a riparian body, that it owns land along the banks, although so does Sandwich Town Council at Cowley's Meadow and the Donkey Paddock. But nevertheless, it's felt that Sandwich Town Council should produce a report on what the problems are, which, has to be said, are historical, very long-term issues with the flow of water, fresh water into Sandwich, which predates this century and the previous century. Because we're so low-lying and all the land around us is low-lying, I was surprised to discover that in some of the local marshy fields the water was raised up on pipes to get a flow into the town, long since disappeared. So though the Environment Agency is responsible for the flow, operation of sluices, and to some extent the state of the water, if you like, nevertheless the Sandwich Town Council should have an opinion and should press that opinion, and that should reflect what local residents want. So in giving that brief report, really I'm explaining the agenda of the first meeting.
Thank you. Anybody got any?
Suppose we receive the verbal update. Thank you very much.
Can you clarify which way the water flows? Because I've never quite understood that. Does it flow from the Delf Stream to the river, past the
It should.
or does it flow the other way?
Pass. I used to live with part of this waterway through my own garden, and I was convinced that it flowed through my garden under, is it New Street or is it Dover Road at that point, and into the Delf, and was told by a member of the internal drainage board, no, it goes the other way. And it is so slow moving that to say that it's got a flow, even if you live with it in your garden, you can't detect it. The breeze is always stronger than the flow. So that will be one of the issues. How do you get a flow? How do you get movement of the water? Which would solve a lot of mosquito problems, because mosquitoes like stagnant water. Some of the councillors will remember we were addressed by 2 members of Dover District Council Pest Committee. Very useful but very depressing, in that they seemed to find evidence of mosquitoes out in the bay, but didn't seem to find evidence of breeding mosquitoes within the town. And yet it's here we suffer.
Well, I mean, we're very grateful, Councillor Heaven, for you taking up this heavy burden, because I've read the literature that there is about the Delf, and I realise that it's, you know, we're going back to the 14th century when they were still trying to get a flow, and that's when they started building it on stilts. And so, you know, it's a long-term problem, but I think we need to be informed as to what the feasibilities are, and that's what you're trying to do. So Councillor Sampson has proposed that we note the verbal update, and anybody seconding that? Councillor Wiles, we're all voting. Thank you. Now this next item about the Bowling Street lighting. I was hoping that we would have some kind of verbal update from Councillor Chandler, but I think something's fallen through the way down by the wayside in terms of inviting her to this meeting. because if you remember, it's about the fact that Sandwich Town, the core of Sandwich has got these heritage lamps, apart from Bowling Street, and the Bowling Street residents are very fed up with it. And at an earlier meeting of this committee, we asked the Chief Executive to write to KCC to ask them to do something about this, and I haven't heard. I know when I talked to the Chief Executive last week about this agenda, she said she had had no response from KCC. I don't know whether there's anything more that we can do, really. Yes, Councillor Sampson.
So I think we've spoken to similar Bowling Street residents, and I've been up there quite a few times, and yeah, that light especially. There's a few obviously need a bit more work, but I think we should still keep pushing. We shouldn't give up.
No, absolutely not.
Councillor Wells.
I think items like this just need to stay on the kind of action list
Yes.
from meeting to meeting until they're resolved.
Okay. So the proposal is that we keep this on the agenda and keep coming back to it, and perhaps write another letter at some later point.
Maybe we request a meeting as well, perhaps to make it seem a bit more serious, try and get their attention, try and get something done as soon as
Yes,
possible.
it really is extraordinary. I can't understand it. Okay, so that's a proposal that we keep it on the agenda.
Seek a meeting.
And we demand a meeting with KCC. I think
Yes,
we should
who is the
definitely say
person
that.
who is the, who does one
Um,
communicate with?
We'll probably have to check whether it counts as heritage or other parts. We'll have to do a decent check. I don't think we want to necessarily demand, we want to ask for a meeting because we want to actually get one.
Yeah.
And presumably we should do it through the KCC councillor, namely Councillor Chandler, or can we write straight to an officer and say, please come and have a look?
Perhaps we speak to Councillor Chancellor about who the best officer to contact would be.
Yes.
You just have to be careful because after the end of March, code rules kick in for the election, so you've got to, if you're going to work, you've got to do it very soon.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. That's helpful. Okay. So we all agree that we should keep this on the agenda and that we should do something about it. Okay. Is that enough for you, artist? Okay. Item 9: empty buildings in Sandwich. And Councillor Sampson has already said he may have to go, but I would find
presume it
it
should be
actually
fine.
helpful, because the 3 outstanding empty properties, though there is a 4th which I won't come back, is the house in New Street, the Lines, schoolhouse next to the infant school, and Wayfarers, which I forgot to put on the agenda, but things are happening at Wayfarers. So if we could just talk about the Lines, I don't know if there's anybody who knows anything about what's happening. I mean, it's been empty for 20 years. Do you know something?
So I presume we want to contact over District Council about that one,
Yeah.
because obviously they're the one that would serve notices, so perhaps we contact them.
Well, I understand there is some plan agreed between District Council and the owner for a programme of works to be done, but I don't know anything more than that.
There's very little sign of any action.
Yeah.
The owner, I presume it's the owner,
Yeah.
who's an old gentleman, is often there pottering about. He's cut down a few saplings.
Yes.
The trees within the Delf stream are still there. There's piles of bricks, but no sign of any significant work going on. But whether there's an agreement with a timescale with DDC, I don't know.
Okay. Well, I suppose I had better write to, Councillor Friend and Councillor Chandler in the first instance, and ask them to find out what's happening yet again.
So Councillor Friend would have been here, again, slight meeting date change, he had to attend this other meeting. But yeah, I presume we just email and ask him for an update.
Yes.
I think we need an update from Council Friend on what's happening.
Yes.
I think he'll know, he's been on top of it. He's been paying
Yeah.
close attention to this for quite a while.
Okay. So I'll write to Councillor Friend and
Can we-
ask him what's happening.
Can we consider though that if it's been empty and deteriorating for over 20 years, that it's more a case of not just asking for an update, but actually asking for a solution, in that presumably we would prefer it if it was brought into use, whatever use that would be,
So
rather than just sit there deteriorating while someone moves piles of bricks from one side of the front to the other. And it's a case of planning enforcement really, rather than what's an update about how many bricks got moved from the left to the right.
So thinking back a little while ago, we were talking to when I think Councillor Holloway was one of our district representatives. I remember when I just joined the council, we're talking probably 2019, 2020, just before COVID decided to pop its ugly head up. And I remember him giving a very good, succinct update about the situation with it. And of course, being around for effectively 20 years, the district has tried to do things, but they've bumped into difficulties every single time. And the amount of legal costs it ends up procuring has effectively stopped. But it'd be interesting to know what this current programme of works that they have agreed is. If they are making some progress, that's something.
I mean, actually, Councillor Wells, I have noticed that something was going on when I walked past it yesterday.
You're talking thousands and thousands of pounds to bring that property up to
Oh,
you.
a million.
One man pottering about is not making any. And the bit to the side is going to fall down at some point.
Yes.
It's in a very structurally unsound condition.
Okay, so it's agreed that I should write to Councillor Friend and Councillor Chandler, the Dover District Council councillors, asking them for an update on what's going on, and Councillor having a solution.
A solution, yeah. In the next 5 minutes. Yeah.
Okay. Schoolhouse. Now this is the house next to the infant school, which, as I understand it, the infant school is very keen to get access to, and it does seem somewhat mysterious that the county council, which presumably owns Schoolhouse and presumably also owns a school, but perhaps Councillor Sampson can fill us in with that.
So I'm not exactly sure what I can and can't say, but essentially as you said, the school is very interested in doing something with Schoolhouse. The county, I can't remember off the top of my head, the property group, their sort of part which looks after such buildings, we're basically trying to find out what is going on with the building to see what next steps could be. That's pretty much where we are at the moment. I have a governor's meeting later this month, where we'll be discussing it a bit further amongst ourselves. That's all I can probably say at the moment, because we're trying to find out.
Councillor Wiles.
Yeah, I did take this up with Councillor Chandler and with the officer in the property department. I should perhaps declare an interest because my partner is a TA at the school. So, it's in there. But yeah, the school is desperate for more space, and the schoolhouse seems like a natural extension for the school because they're doing lots of one-to-one activities with children. I think the two complicating factors, one is it's been empty for about 4 or 5 years now, and the second complicating factor is that the school is part of the Aquila Trust, so it's an academy, so it's not part of the public sector as such. And the third complicating factor is that the infant school at some future date might move to a new location. So I think the county council are having problems about making a decision about whether they can give it to the school because it's not a public body as such. It's a semi-public body.
I see.
So that's the complication. But it seems to me that the county council, which is on the verge of bankruptcy, could at least make a short-term decision to let it to the school on a commercial or sub-commercial rent, just while all these issues are discussed.
Presumably, if it's been empty for up to 4 years, it will need quite a lot of
Well,
put it right?
from what I can see, it's wind and weather type. It's connected to the school internally. All of the heating and the services are connected to the school. So it's been on the disposals list, but to me it would be mad to dispose of it privately to a family or a private residence when the school is kind of joined at the hip with the school. The house is joined at the hip with the school. So that's where we are.
Is there anything that this committee can do at the moment?
I think write to Councillor Chandler, who will take it up with the portfolio holder and try and make them see, even if it's not long term, at least a short term solution which allows the school to use that space.
Yeah, I'll follow up the governors.
Yes, okay, so let's go do that. I'll write to Councillor Chandler and say that this committee is very concerned about the fact that the school needs that space and that the space is likely to be, and it's an obvious space for the school going to be, but the space is likely to deteriorate or be deteriorating, and that it makes perfect sense for the school to get access to it. And similarly, presumably, you as a member of the Board of Governors can, the Board of Governors can write in similar fashion.
I'm planning to add it to the agenda for our meeting, which is 25th this month,
Right.
as well as seek further information from council as well. So yeah, I'll carry on with that.
Okay.
I think the latest I heard was that the head teacher was being asked to put together a business case for
I
use
think
of
we've
that
spoken to the
space
same person.
via Richard Rowell,
Right.
whose wife is a governor.
Okay. Okay. Oh, well, it sounds as though there'll be pressure
From all sides, that's
Yes.
the more the merrier.
Yes. Okay. And the final empty building that I want to talk about is Wayfarers. Local people have noticed that there is work of some kind going on there, and I noticed that Councillor Chandler responded to the query which I think Councillor Sivrikaya sent to her about what's going on, by saying that things are moving on now. At the last meeting, she informed us via email that a successful bid had been made, although I discovered when I looked, it seemed to be the case that the building was still being marketed, and certainly that the sale sign is still there. But it sounds as though something is happening. So I think, I don't know whether there's anything else that we can do. We seem to be a passive recipient of decisions made elsewhere. To close it, yes.
Well, we are, other people make a decision, but we're surely allowed to express an opinion. I recall that it was put up for sale at a time when care homes were closing down and were not being funded adequately, but there was a drive at national government level for more residential building. Now that seems to have completely been turned on its head. The drive for build has been, verbally anyway, dropped, and there have been verbal statements from national government that there should be more resources put into care homes or care in the community. So there may be space for this body or Sandwich Town Council, should it wish, to lobby Kent County Council to the effect that its future should be as a care home and not as another building site.
Yes, I'm agreeing with what Councillor Heaven's saying. However, I do believe it's a private sale, so I don't think if we do put something into the KCC to say what's going on, I don't think they're going to respond to it because it's a private sale. That's the only thing, because it's been the land and the building's being sold, isn't it? So I'm not sure whether if we do put something in, the KCC will say in it, I'm not sure, because it's a private sale.
So
It might undermine the sale.
In what sense?
I
Is
thought
it a private
KCC
sale?
owned it.
KCC, but it's up for sale, isn't it? So the building and the land's up for sale, big sale sign outside it. So if it's been sold, I'm not sure that the
Oh.
KCC will be,
I didn't realise it had been sold.
I'm not sure,
Well,
because it's still
they're sort
saying
of
for sale.
half claiming
Yes.
that it has been, but it still seems to be marketed. I mean, that's what's so weird about it. So, I mean, the deal has not been done, but.
I mean, by all means, if you want to put something into KCC, do so, but I don't think we'll get a response personally.
Okay, Councillor Sampson.
Yeah, so I think going back to when we last discussed this, the problem was, and this is why it's up for sale in the first place, is they tried to get the care home people in, and sadly, that wasn't going to work. It would have been great if it was. My own great nan actually went there. But yeah, let's just find out what we can.
Yes, I mean, you know, it's an empty building with, as I understand it, high-class facilities, if not ensuite bathrooms for every room, which is, I think, one of the reasons why it's no
Yes.
longer a care home. But there are hundreds of thousands of homeless people in this country, and amongst them, very large numbers of Ukrainian refugees who are becoming homeless at the rate of knots at the moment. And I can't see why it couldn't be used for that kind of accommodation. And it seems extraordinary that it just sits there empty.
I think we want to be slightly careful, especially it'd be nice to see what the building is. And if it isn't fit for example, caring for the elderly, it's probably not going to be fit for other people as well.
Well, living in a hotel isn't suitable either, and that's what a great number of refugees are currently doing. And you know, one doesn't have to think that hard to think of alternative uses for it. But so, how do we want to proceed? Do we want?
Let's confirm if it's been sold and maybe to whom.
Well, I think first we need an update from Kent County Council as to just what is happening.
Yes.
Has it been sold? Are there negotiations for sale? Has a buyer been found? And
Yes.
so on.
Propose that
And
then.
could it be used for an alternative
Propose
temporary purpose while it sits empty?
Mm.
It's been empty, is it 2 years now?
Yeah,
2 years.
something like that.
Yeah.
I
So
mean,
it might need some
Last February, when it was proposed for Ukrainian refugees, we were told it had been sold or was under offer.
Mm.
Now we're nearly a year on, and
Nothing's happened.
the KCC, I have to say, are not managing their assets particularly well.
No. So what would you like? Would you like me to write to Councillor Chandler about it?
Mm.
Okay.
Yes.
And suggest maybe that it should be used for alternative purposes on a temporary basis. Okay, thank you. Item 10, public conveniences on the quay. And this item, and we have a very good report from the responsible finance officer, is on the agenda because it's come up loud and clear at both the Tourist Information Working Group meetings, which I've observed. The question of toilet facilities in this town is clearly one that people are very concerned about, particularly the businesses round the quay and the medieval centre, because they find that people come into the Bell Hotel because they've been unable to access the toilets on the quay, or people come to the medieval centre when it's open saying, help, you know, do you have a key? The fact that these toilets, I decided not to look at the ones in the cattle market, but I think we will need to look at those too. But these toilets were refurbished in May 21, so the access to them has been in operation for nearly 2 years, and we stopped paying people to look after them just over 2 years ago. So it seems to me that it's time now to look at whether that's worked. And we do have some figures here, which, if you've read the Finance Officer's report, are very helpful and very clear. And there are two bottom lines. When the toilets on the quay were run by paid staff and cared for by paid staff, the total cost was in the region, well, between 23,500 and 25,500 pounds. And the total cost of running the new system, which has this automatic access if you use a bank card, is 16,000, or we'll call it 16,500. The difference being approximately £7,000 a year between those two bottom lines. And I think we need to think about it, because people get very angry actually about how these toilets are failing. We need to think about the kind of impression that Sandwich is giving and whether it's worth paying £7,000 a year for a better impression. That's my view of what the main issue is. Councillor Marie.
Yeah, my opinion is to make them free. The only time I've ever paid to spend a penny, as it were, is in the London train station. They charge you to go in there. It shouldn't be chargeable. I don't think it should, but I don't think it's right. Many of the events that chairmen have spoken to agree with me that it shouldn't be chargeable. August Bank Holiday weekend on the Sunday evening when we have the party down the Quay Green. Quay Green's packed out with people, and most of the queue is down by the toilet because they can't get in because it's either broken, because it times out after a while if people keep going in and out, and it locks itself out. So and yeah, I strongly feel that they should be free. We should be charging people to spend a penny within the town for enjoying the town's tourism, the restaurants, the pubs, and etc. So my opinion is to make them, for this committee to put a recommendation into the council to make them free for the summer, at least for the summer.
And not looked after, because the cattle market toilets are free.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not looked after, and they're horrible. So I think if the toilets are free, but they nevertheless have to be kept in good order, we will need to employ staff, and that will make the costs higher.
I mean, the toilets on the cattle market, they're old. They're in dire need of a replacement, of an upgrade. So. That's another thing we can speak about, but as I said, I disagree with people being charged to use convenience.
Thank you. Councillor Sampson and then Councillor Green.
Yeah, so we are stuck in this awkward position of they can be free, but they can be terrible and nobody wants to use them, or they can cost, and obviously I think there's some difficulty with that, and I think obviously that's going to deter them from using them. There's other problems at the moment. If using probably a reasonable...
Can you talk a bit more slowly, Councillor Sampson, because Artie's trying to take notes and I can't hear you when you talk very fast.
Sorry, I'm just looking forward to dinner.
Yes, well, we're getting through the business. We'll get there.
Well, yeah. So we are stuck in between a difficult position. Using a personal anecdote, literally, this weekend past, myself and the mayor attended the medieval centre for what can only be described as a very interesting performance. Wassail, etc., lots of fun. And we were speaking to the some of the people who operate the centre, and we've spoken to them before a few times. I would suggest we open a conversation with them regarding the toilet facilities to see if we could come to some kind of an agreement, and perhaps maybe even the Heritage Harbour as well, to see if something might be possible.
Come on to it in a minute.
Start the conversation, at least get the ball rolling.
Even a survey.
Yeah, but I think you've also got to bring Deborah Councilman to this, because what we're trying to do in the Heritage Harbour is encourage boats to come and moor on the quay. And Dover Council will get substantial mooring fees from those boats who moor on the quay. And they will also make big use of the toilet facilities. I mean, for instance, it is looking likely that later in May this year, we will have a fleet of 30 traditional vessels moored on the quay for probably about a week while they have a rally before they're doing a round Britain cruise. Now, that Dover Council are entitled will charge mooring fees for those vessels, and they will also use the toilet facilities. So Dover Council really ought to make a contribution towards the cost of looking after these toilet facilities. Now, I don't know whether they do make any contribution, or whether they ever have made any contribution in the past.
It appears not.
I know there have been very few vessels more than the quay recently. The Dover Council are also talking about wanting to try and encourage visiting yachts to come more up in the quay. So I think we do need to open a dialogue with Dover Council and say that they should pay to the Town Council a proportion of the mooring fees they get to compensate for or contribute toward the cost of keeping the toilets going.
Well, in that case, proposal would be, we open a dialogue, Sandwich Medieval Trust, Heritage Harbour and Dover District Council, discuss further, but we can work like an operating, I'm losing my words now, negotiate with them to come to some kind of agreement that gets what we all want.
Okay. Councillor Waller.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with that. I've heard the Medieval Trust were interested in taking on some kind of role in managing the toilets. But maybe also speak to the B22 and River Runner, who also have an interest in toilets on the quay for their customers. Maybe the Liverpool and other
You
places.
can't forget substantial income from the River Runner, mooring there. And
Yeah.
there are people who use it, also use the toilets.
I mean, what this report doesn't say is that the actual numbers using the toilets, which has clearly dropped. So what's the point of having a facility which is costing money and is not being used,
Yes, and making people angry.
and making people angry about the way we're running things?
Yes.
So there needs to be some
I have
other
a feeling of a working group.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yes.
The Tourism Information Working Group are going to do a survey in the summer, I believe, regarding the tourism. So maybe that can be implemented into that. The other thing is the Medieval Trust in the summer spends £700 for 4 days for the portable loos we put down. So, and they that's part of their funding that they apply for every year to pay for those for 4 toilets. So yeah, maybe that can be suggestions instead of setting up another working group, is to put it into a survey regarding the tourism.
I think the other thing in this report is that clearly the facilities manager is spending huge amounts of time on technology that doesn't work.
Yes.
Why have we paid for broken technology?
Yeah.
I think it's because due to the fact that the staff declined, didn't it? It went from 4 members of staff a week on, week off to nothing. So.
Councillor Henry.
Yeah, I don't think we should forget Councillor Marie's proposal that we make them free, because it occurs to me that if this is the cost of a high-tech toilets, even if free toilets which are open all the time and therefore would be subject to vandalism, no doubt, at some stage, the cost of that may not even exceed the money that we're paying now. So that if we're only going to be taking on staff to keep them clean and up to date, then Dover District Council and others could well meet that cost. So I wouldn't like these ideas that were floated now about who might help. I wouldn't like that to mean that we forget that there's a perfectly good proposal that we make them free.
Okay, so
Yeah, and I think income of less than 3,000 a year, it barely seems worth the. I know it's a lot of money to some people, but for a town council, it's peanuts really. We should think about the service rather than the income.
Yes.
So then in terms of a proposal, we've got, let me see, Heritage Harbour Group, Medieval Trust, Dover District Council, the River Runner, P22, approach all of these to try and negotiate some kind of a resolution where we can make the toilets free, but still
Yes.
clean or high enough quality.
I mean, we would have to, I mean, when the staff were there, they were working 8 hours a day, every day, I presume,
Mm-hmm.
throughout the year.
Yes.
That's
Correct. During the summer.
363 days of the year. Yes, but if all those organisations put in £3,000, then we might.
It might not necessarily just be in terms of money, it could be in terms of time. So like maybe the medieval trust could do certain things.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's costing us 14,000 a year, then between those organisations, you could say, we'll do a deal with you, we'll give you 3,000 a year each. It'd be cheaper than it is now, and all they do is have a rota whereby they check it 3 or 4 times a day.
I mean, you can see here, as Councillor Wild said, we're just hemorrhaging money. It's 14,000, I mean, like 21-22, £14,214 of the overall cost. And the council only make an income of just under £3,000. So we're just hemorrhaging money.
So it's even worse than that actually, because the estimated forecast is 16,000 now as well.
For this year, yeah.
So, I mean, I do feel that it would be appropriate actually to set up a separate working group, but just to address this particular issue, and maybe include the capital market loos as well. But do I have your support if I suggest that?
I think I'm worried we have a lot of working groups.
We've only got 2.
That's
So
it.
3 if you include the disability one.
As long as we don't call it the Sandwich Heritage Interested Toilets Group.
I don't think that's a good idea at all.
Conveniences.
We've already got an improved water flow working group.
The sandwich waterways working group would be obvious one.
If that's going to be the proposition, then I'm interested.
Sorry, could you say that again?
If that's probably the easiest way for us to make action on this and approach people, then yeah, let's go with it.
Yeah, I'm interested. If you do set one up, I'm interested in becoming involved in that as well.
And I think sandwich events would be very interesting.
Yes.
As well.
Because they're one of the main people that will be speaking to me saying, let's get it free. Come on, we need to get it free.
Yeah.
So.
No, I think we should do that.
Okay, so we recommend, I mean, we can, as a committee, we can set up our own working group.
Yes.
We don't have to make a recommendation to the council to do that. So shall we do that?
Yeah, why delay?
Yes, do it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And is there somebody here who's willing to chair it and put it together?
I'll give it a go.
Oh, well,
Why
thank
not?
you. That would be great.
That'd be good.
So it's agreed that we set up a working group to look at the provision of toilets and charges in Sandwich. Are you going to include the capital market loos as well?
Yes, I think the priority at first would be the ones on the
Yes,
queue.
because
The
we
thing
do
one
have
with the
clearly
Yeah.
interested parties in making certain that those
I
loos
think
are
we-
really good.
The cattle market we should look at is just obviously going to be a very different kind of beast, but still,
It's still relevant to events, isn't it?
yeah.
Absolutely.
We're in the forecourts.
Gotcha.
So Councillor Sampson will chair this working group, and you'll put together a membership. It doesn't have to be, it has to be up to a maximum of 5 councillors and
Okay.
a maximum of 4 outsiders. And
I would keep it small.
yes,
Small and just quick, get on with it kind of thing.
yes, and the fact that you've been appointed by this committee as chair of the working group gives you a sort of leverage on these other organisations. You can, say that's what you're doing. It has a maximum life of 6 months, but it would be good to, get a report within a couple of months to this committee.
I'll get on sooner.
Okay, excellent, thank you. Brilliant.
Good.
In the meantime, I'll think of lots of puns to do with toilets and
So I've got a few.
Please not.
conveniences.
Okay, Oh yes, I wanted us to have, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but I thought we should begin to think about the kinds of issues that this committee should be talking about over the next year or so. I mean, obviously the committee might change because the elections will come along in the middle of this year. But, and I made a short list of issues that are of interest personally to me and that we might put on the agenda at some point, but I'm sure you'll have others. The first is that there are two vision plans, and one for the town, the sort of within the walled town. No, it goes beyond that. The old vision for Sandwich plan, and there's also a vision for the Quay plan, which I don't understand why we've never actually talked about it at this council. But so that was one issue that I thought would be that we should look at. A second was the Heritage Harbour plans, which Councillor Gray has just referred to. The third was Fellowship Walk, and I think possibly everybody knows the Heritage Harbour. There is Sandwich is now a Heritage Harbour, which has a national meaning, and Councillor Gray is heading up that initiative. Then Fellowship Walk, the planning proposal, to build flats on Fellowship Walk has today, we've all been notified that it's failed, it's been rejected. And that is an absolute, I find it a complete blot on the landscape, and I think that as the Heritage and Townscape Committee we should be talking about it. Another issue is specific issues about Sandwich South, which in many ways has many problems, as we know. And one of them clearly is the speed of traffic down the Woodnesborough Road and whether anything can be done about that. An extremely dangerous road.
Just to, I don't know if anybody, sorry, Councillor, just to mention that this morning a car was travelling about 60 miles an hour through Laburnum Avenue and hit a dog. I'm not sure about what the dog had, how bad the dog is. I put a comment on the social media today, see how it was, and there's been no update yet. But yeah, no, traffic calming is definitely needed in that area. Extremely, it's extremely dangerous, especially when there's a school that goes straight through the middle of it.
And the final issue that I identified, that this is a particular of interest to me, is pedestrianisation, because I mean it comes up all the time, and I think we should have a look at it. But there may be other issues that you think should be part of what we discuss as priorities over the next year. Councillor
And I
Wiles.
think tourism and the waterways, obviously.
Well, they're already
on
under
the
discussion.
agenda.
Yes. I mean, I was assuming that that would continue.
I think certainly Fellowship Walk, I think given the planning refusal on that site, I think the town council should approach the owner about potential purchase of the site for a community use of some kind.
Yeah.
On the basis that he's very unlikely to get planning permission for any kind of development.
It's classed as sacred land, isn't it? It's got exactly the same restraints on it as what Stonehenge has. So I don't think that whatever he's going to put on there for planning permission, it's going to get failed instantly. So it's going to get rejected. So,
And given the legacy we've got, you know, there could be a scope for using some of that for purchase and for laying it out as a community space, maybe a bandstand or a community allotment or orchard or anything.
Jim.
maybe a conversation can be had regarding the monies the town council's just received from Georgina Maddox.
That's what we're talking
Yeah,
about.
that's what I'm talking about, yes, yeah. I mean, that would be a real possibility to use that, or part of that towards
Because her
some
will,
sort of, make it some sort of
Yeah,
Georgina Maddox Memorial Garden. or
something like that, fantastic,
in
yeah.
that area.
Her will.
A really, really good use of that land,
her will requires some kind of physical legacy,
yes.
not, you know,
Yeah.
that will last for 100 years or more.
Yeah.
And some trees, perhaps.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm getting a sense that you approve of this sort of list, and that perhaps the first one that we should talk about is Fellowship Walk, with a view to making recommendations to council as to what might be put there. I can see Councillor Sampson is.
Yeah, so I was very happy about the news today, and I was actually approached by a few residents recently before this was even posted about today. It looks ugly as hell.
Say it again.
It looks ugly as hell. It's
It's dreadful. It looks
Yeah.
absolutely frightful, and the fencing is just abominable.
so this is something I was chasing up with anyway in terms of enforcement to see what can be done with that. The only thing that I'm a little bit concerned about is in terms of actually purchasing the land. We want to be careful to make sure that we're not going to suddenly spend all the money on it, and then we've got this piece of land that we can't do anything with that's going to then benefit the town. Obviously, like a gym, we've already got 2 fantastic ones in town.
We haven't got an outdoor gym really.
Well,
That's, anyway,
something to be
but
looked
I mean,
at.
those are the sorts of things that we would have to talk about.
Yeah, I think we just want to be very careful we're not rinsed on the cost. That's the only thing
No.
I'm concerned about.
Yeah. No, agreed.
So I'll put that on the agenda for our next meeting, and then some of these other issues. I mean, as I said at the beginning of the meeting, I rather regret that Councillor Gray won't be a member of this committee anymore, because he's the expert about the Heritage Harbour, but we can always ask you to.
Well, I'm happy to come and
Yeah.
talk about it.
Yes.
I mean, and going back to your point you mentioned about the new vision for Sandwich document and the Dover Council document, and you've asked why it hasn't been discussed. The reason is the Dover Council gave us all copies of that agreement, and a long time ago, of this consultant's report on the future of the quay, and they asked us to treat it confidentially and not discuss it.
Yes.
And that still remains. They've still, they've allowed the Heritage Harbour Group to be given it and to discuss it amongst themselves. I think the Thornton Haven Commission have discussed it amongst themselves, haven't they?
Yes.
Well,
but it's
they've
always,
been allowed to discuss it.
yeah,
but
it's always below
The
the
Sandwich Town
surface.
Council has been asked not to because it's highly confidential. So, which really we ought to get from Dover Council now the right to discuss it, because there's nothing we can do about it.
No. So
It's sitting in all you've got copies of it all on your iPads.
yes. So I know that there is a particular Dover District Councillor who's very interested in promoting it, and I can't remember his name. Oliver somebody.
Richardson.
Oh,
Oliver Richardson, yes.
very good.
Should I write to him and say, we want to talk about it? Why don't you come and talk to us about it? Or
Yes, I
something
think
like
you
that.
should, because I read to him about the Heritage Harbour. I said it's crazy we can't talk about it, right?
Yeah.
Because we're trying to do something about it. And he did say, yes, you can talk about it amongst yourselves, but keep it confidential. So he would be the man to write to.
Okay, so I'll write to Councillor Richardson and say, this committee would like to hear from him. And if it has to be confidential, well, so be it, though it does seem ridiculous.
We might
But
ask
would
them
you
for
like to
the
come
reasons.
would you like to come and talk to us about it?
Yes,
Because that's really what I'd like
Yes.
to hear from David Council.
and similarly, I would like to hear from Councillor Gray about the Heritage Harbour, because I don't
Well, I'm
think,
very happy to do that.
yes. Okay, yes, Councillor.
Yeah, just on Councillor Sampson's point about management, Gallows Field, which Gaze and Salts looks after, it requires, we turn that into a kind of wildflower meadow, and it requires minimal maintenance. We've got harvest mice on there now, flowers, so similar thing could be done at Fellowship Walk probably with volunteer rate, minimal cost.
And those fences need to come down.
Yes.
It it'll need some upfront capital work being done, but once it's up and running, then it's mowing a couple of times a year.
Even if you turned it into a forest school
Yeah.
for the schools in the town.
Yeah.
Yes, very good idea. Okay, so I'll put a fellowship walk on the agenda for next time.
Just one more thing, sorry, Councillor Anderson. You
Yeah.
mentioned about priorities for next year with pedestrianisation of the town. I believe that we was going to do a review or a
So that's on the planning thing, so that
Yeah.
would probably be going ahead at some point. I'm not quite sure.
From the local place.
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm.
But for me personally, I will not be supporting it.
No, well, we have to talk about it
Mm.
clearly, and there will be all sorts of different views. I mean, sometimes one can change one's mind. Just put that there. Okay. Item 12, I think that's enough on item 11.
Yeah.
Item 12, I put this on because we do now, in this month, have the right to appoint external members. And that's in the standing orders. And we've talked about the kinds of issues that we will be thinking about at this committee. So I thought we should talk about co-option members after that item. We could choose not to have co-optees, or we could, well, there are three options. Not to have co-optees at all, to have co-optees who represent particular organisations within the town that are concerned with heritage and townscape, and or to have co-optees who we know are experts, have their own expertise about heritage and townscape, though they may not be representing a particular organisation. We only have 3 slots. So, Councillor Sampson.
Yeah, no, this is just to note, under planning, I'm no longer on that, that's Martin Pennington. But yeah, I think we should have co-opted members. Again, there's always going to be skills in the town that we don't have. I think if we can find experts, maybe disregarding where they come from, that'd be good. It's just, does anybody have any suggestions at the moment? Like I would say, John Hennessy.
I have one suggestion. He's on the. I proposed him for the co-option for the tours information, and that's Steve Laslett. Sandwich Community Events Associations having co-opted for this committee to do it, but I haven't approached him yet.
No, that's a good idea. Councillor
I think also maybe someone from the Sandwich Society.
Yes.
I mean, we've
The
got,
Sandwich Society is a little bit, I don't know whether it's functioning.
they did respond to me very quickly on the
Oh, right,
tourism.
is that Alan Harrison Brooks?
David's. But John Hennessy is on the planning committee.
Yes.
Whether they want to be on this committee as well,
Yes.
I don't know. Maybe a different member.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, clearly the heritage side of it has to be someone from the local history or the Sandwich Society.
Yes.
Member of someone from the town team,
Yeah,
possibly.
Yes.
I think History Society is definitely a good show. Sandwich Society, depending on who's interested.
maybe on the cult, the kind of town, the wider thing, Steve Laslett or someone like Siobhan from the St Mary's is, quite clued into the events that are going on,
Yes.
the arts events.
Let's approach these people, I'd say.
Well, what I suggest is that you send me a note of whom you're suggesting, and would you leave it up to me, to my discretion, to sort them into a list of priorities and start asking people?
We'll bring it back to this meeting.
Would that be acceptable to you?
I'd suggest, interview them, make a few notes.
Oh. Wait,
No, I think a list of people, and then we decide, and then we can, as a committee, decide democratically who should be.
I think you bring the list back to this.
Okay, so send me copy everybody on this committee into your suggestions, send them to me, I'll make a list for the next meeting and then I'll have a look and decide. We'll probably have to make it a confidential item because we don't want to have people hearing their names discussed.
I think they have to make it clear they can make the commitment and that they've got the time to
once a month
contribute.
commitment. Yes, at plus. Okay, dates of the next meeting, I talked about this with the chief executive, and it did seem, because we have overlapping membership with the planning committee, and we need to meet more or less at the same time as the planning committee in order to get our recommendations to the council, that actually we need to meet on a different day of the week. And she advised me that it was the tradition that we meet on Mondays, the committees meet on Mondays and Wednesdays. So I went along with that, and we have identified these Mondays. Are they acceptable to you?
Yeah, I mean, the only limiting factor for me is work, but other than that, yes.
Okay. So those dates are accepted, and we will go with them.
Just be, yeah, as I said before, Councillor, just be mindful that the 17th of April you'll be under PERDA rules. So
Yes, does that mean we can't meet?
We can certainly meet. I'm
You
just,
can meet, yes, but you,
I think we need to check exactly how this is going to work for whenever it starts. But I'm sure that the staff will be able to advise us on that.
the date it starts, sorry, apologies, I had it up a minute ago. The date it starts is the latest date for the pre-election period can start is the Monday the 28th of March. That's the latest PERDA can start.
Oh well, we're meeting on the 13th of March.
Yeah.
Oh, the 17th of April
Yeah.
would be, but I'm sure we can go on meeting.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we can. It's just
oh, we can
certain
meet, yes,
things
it's just you need to
certain
be
constraints.
restricted on what we can and can't do.
Right. Well, thank you very much, and thank you to
Thank
Archie,
you.
who said
Thank you
he's
very
going to
much.
do the minutes tomorrow, which, well, send me the draft, obviously, and we'll go through.